The month of February was one of the most crowded times during the Jubilee. Thousands of people fled to the Roman streets to receive the relics of two famous saints who devoted much time in the confessional hearing confession, St. Leopold Mandic and Padre Pio. The relics were exposed for several days in St. Peter's Basilica, and even Pope Francis went to pray before them. In February, the Pope made perhaps the most important trip of the year, a visit to Mexico with a stop in Cuba.
È un viaggio impegnativo, troppo serrato, ma tanto voluto dal mio fratello Cirillo, da me e anche dai messicani.
At the airport in Havana, the Pope met with the Patriarch of Moscow for the first time in history. They greeted each other with 3 kisses, as mandated by Russian tradition. They met for 2 hours behind closed doors and then signed a historic joint declaration. With their signatures, they also sealed the end of nearly 1,000 years of mutual distrust. A few hours later, the Pope arrived in Mexico, where he was well received. The trip lasted nearly 6 days, and the first major event was a mass at the Basilica of Guadalupe, before about 35,000 people.
Sé mi embajador, nos dice, dando de comer al hambriento, de beber al sediento, da lugar al necesitado, viste al desnudo y visita al enfermo. Socorre al que está preso, no lo dejes solo. Perdona al que te lastimó, consuela al que está triste, tené paciencia con los demás.
After Mass, the Pope stopped before the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe and prayed silently for nearly 30 minutes at the landmark. From Mexico City, he traveled to Chiapas to be close to the indigenous, who are considered the least of the country. That's why he asked them for forgiveness.
Perdón, hermanos. El mundo de hoy, despojado por la cultura del descarte, los necesita a ustedes.
In Chiapas, he also met with thousands of families. Some celebrated 50 years of marriage by once again exchanging their vows, but this time with the Pope as a witness.
El amor no es fácil. No es fácil, ¿no? Pero es lo más lindo que un hombre y una mujer se pueden dar entre sí. El verdadero amor, para toda la vida.
The next day, he was in Morelia, Michoacán, in the area that had been linked to drug trafficking and violence.
¿Qué tentación nos puede venir de ambientes muchas veces dominados por la violencia, la corrupción, el tráfico de drogas, el desprecio por la dignidad de la persona, la indiferencia ante el sufrimiento y la precariedad? Creo que la podríamos resumir con una sola palabra: resignación.
The crowded meeting was held in a stadium with thousands of young people. However, one young man could not control his excitement and caused this scene. The last day of Pope Francis's trip was in Ciudad Juarez, where he visited one of the most dangerous prisons in the country to personally greet dozens of inmates and prisoners.
Gracias por acordarse de nosotros, por su sencillez, por su humildad.
En la capacidad que tenga una sociedad de incluir a sus pobres, a sus enfermos o a sus presos, está la posibilidad de que ellos puedan sanar sus heridas y ser constructores de una buena convivencia.
He then celebrated Mass on the border between Mexico and the United States. On the Mexican side, more than 200,000 pilgrims attended, and on the U.S. side, there were about 50,000 pilgrims in El Paso. The Pope stopped before this cross that could be seen from both countries to pray for all the forced migrants who have died trying to cross the border. He recalled that migration has become a global phenomenon and a humanitarian crisis that cannot be measured solely in numbers.
Esta crisis que se puede medir en cifras, nosotros queremos medirla por nombres, por historias, por familias.
Thousands of people waited for him at the airport, but it was this little Mexican who won the last greeting from Pope Francis. The main state visit the Pope received in February was from the first Argentine president, Mauricio Macri. It was a politically correct meeting, but one that was almost a bit cold because Pope Francis wanted to show the normalization of relations with the country, which until then were a little exaggerated. The Pope made one casual, joking comment to the president's wife when he reminded her of the absence of a small but important part of the family, her daughter.
Antonio.